The Physical Conversation. Hi, my name is Jesse Rhodes, an associate professor in the College of Education and Human Development at the University of North Dakota. In this short video, I plan on describing a phenomenon within the gymnasium which we have termed the physical conversation. Myself and Tim Hopper at the University of Victoria, Canada, have been working over the past 3 years on this phenomenon's quantification and application within physical education pedagogy.
So what is the physical conversation?
Well, it's actually a pretty simple idea. It relies on a well-documented phenomena of human social interaction. This phenomena is called interpersonal coordination. This term simply means that some people tend to imitate specific other people. We also call this non-conscious mimicry, as typically this behavior is not consciously performed. Based on previous research findings, we can generally predict whom a person will non-consciously mimic. Specifically, studies have identified factors which foster the emergence of this phenomena. These factors are pre-existing rapport, a goal to affiliate, pro-social orientation, similarity, or even mood or emotions.
So why is non-conscious mimicry important for physical education?
The importance can be found in constructivism. If we look at non-conscious mimicry from a constructivist point of view, that is, that knowledge is constructed at the student level and never transmitted, this would mean that non-conscious mimicry would inherently represent the construction of knowledge. This is important in that non-conscious mimicry as a construction is based upon their peers primarily and not necessarily on teacher instruction. Essentially, non-conscious mimicry would represent a naturally occurring learning connection between students. However, non-conscious mimicry is again based upon specific factors which may or may not be present within any given grouping of students and thus is largely outside the control of teachers. This would mean that this network is relatively fragmented and fragile.
Then who benefits from non-conscious mimicry?
Well, let's take a look at an example. Here we have Jake and Sammy. And let's assume that Sammy is currently non-consciously mimicking Jacob, and Jake happens to be a very good soccer player. So we can probably assume that Sammy, through this non-conscious mimicry, is constructing some psychomotor knowledge based upon Jake's play, which happens to be fairly good. So Sammy is probably receiving some learning benefit from this interaction. So what about Jacob? Is he benefiting from this? Simply put, probably not. What we're looking at is fundamentally not a conversation. This is how most non-conscious mimicry exists. It is a one-way monologue in which one person is mimicked with no reciprocation and most likely a lopsided benefit.
Can we take this monologue and turn it into a dialogue?
Simply put, we should be able to. The key, which we have identified, is found in a few factors for non-conscious mimicry. Particularly factors which are not mutually exclusive, or factors which both partners can exhibit simultaneously. These specific factors being a goal to affiliate, pre-existing rapport, or a pro-social orientation. If both partners exhibit these factors, we predict that their non-conscious mimicry will both be reciprocal as well as recursive or ongoing. In this way, through the exploitation of these mutual factors, we could enable a physical discussion to emerge widely throughout the gymnasium.
So what exactly is a discussion?
That is a great question. Well, fundamentally, a discussion is an exchange between two or more people. In a verbal conversation, you have an exchange through a verbal medium. Within physical education, the physical conversation is going to take place in a kinematic medium or through movement patterns.
So what actually happens during the physical discussion?
Well, in the physical discussion, everybody benefits. Through the physical discussion, students would be able to identify movements that work, modify their own movements, and possibly develop new movement strategies. The continuous nature of this discussion would mean that over time, each partner would pick up new pieces of the movement solution. Through this recursive process, motor patterns would either be rejected or reinforced. This is the power of the physical discussion, student self-discovery mediated by an underlying social phenomenon.
So how do we prompt this discussion?
We already know that some non-conscious mimicry, as well as reciprocal non-conscious mimicry, is occurring naturally. However, we would like to amplify this phenomena if possible. A teacher could, for instance, use instructional strategies that are specifically designed to foster a desire for affiliation, development of rapport, or pro-social orientation. Through these strategies, we could possibly foster the emergence of the physical discussion and boost the proliferation of this learning network. Finally, this naturally occurring fragile network will be solidified through the artificial amplification of these factors and possibly increase overall student achievement. Let's take a look at what the discussion might actually look like. Here we have Sammy and Jacob again, but this time we have primed their social environment as to take advantage of a goal to affiliate. In this situation, we can speculate, based on previous research, that there will be some reciprocal recursive non-conscious mimicry or a physical discussion occurring. The columns on the sides of Sammy and Jacob are highly stylized representations of motor sequences. These are just an abstract representation of motor patterns, allowing us to view changes over time due to the physical conversation. This illustration is essentially what we conceptualize would be occurring during the physical conversation. Through their mutual exchange, both partners pick up, keep, and discard some aspects of their discussion. In this way, through this exchange, both partners have changed their motor patterns. The motor patterns after the discussion are an amalgamation of both partners. The students are both creators and owners of the new patterns. The newly constructed knowledge is based upon their previous knowledge, experiences, the partners' experiences, and their combined experiences. This is represented in the sequences changing, but not totally being identical. To an observer, these motor sequences will look very similar, but still have their own distinct attributes.
Okay, so students may be exchanging knowledge through this discussion, but how do we know if the knowledge is of high quality?
Simply, teachers are one of the most critical components for a productive physical conversation. This is where the teacher is incredibly important. The teacher must moderate the conversation in such a way as to provide structure. Critical feedback and encouragement will allow this discussion to be productive and on task. It is true that this conversation could take place without any teacher interaction. However, we could not assure that this conversation would work toward the goals of the lesson, and in fact, based upon some pairings, may vary widely from the overall lesson's goals. It is true that productivity may take place naturally between two students without teacher interaction, but the moderation of an expert teacher will allow for a better outcome through their critical and concurrent feedback. In this way, the natural process of learning and construction of knowledge is enhanced through the work of a highly qualified physical education teacher. So let's bring in Jacob and Sammy's class. Here, their teacher has employed an instructional strategy that is targeted at creating an affiliative response between students. The teacher is moderating the conversation, and the students are constructing knowledge based upon their nearest neighbors. Through this fragile network, student knowledge is disseminated and constructed throughout the class. Essentially, we could hypothesize that the entire class is benefiting through their cumulative knowledge construction. Overall, the possibilities of this phenomena for physical education should merit research into its applications and effect on student learning. As of yet, this topic has barely been scraped. So that's the physical conversation. If you are interested in learning more about this notion, please feel free to contact me at jesse.rhodes@email.und.edu.